Now, if you live out here in India and you're into motorcycles, and for a matter of fact, if you've been around for as long as I have, which is over 30 years, yes, I'm not as young as I look, well, the name Pulsar will certainly ring a bell. That's because this brand from Bajaj has been around for more than 20 years. The first original Pulsar came out way back in 2002, and the last iteration of this epic motorcycle came out 2 years ago. Now, this model that we have out here today is called the P150, an ode to the original 150cc motorcycle that came out 20 years ago. And over the course of time, there have been a couple of spin-off brands from Pulsar itself. There has been the Pulsar NS, which stands for Naked Sport, the Pulsar N, which is just plain naked, and now you have the Pulsar P150, which is, well, plain old Pulsar. Now, how different is this motorcycle from the others in Bajaj's kitty? What makes it so unique? We're here to find out. So let's get to it.
Now, to begin with, the P150 is an all-new Pulsar. That means you have an all-new engine, new chassis, and even the suspension setup is very different in comparison to the older Pulsar 150 model. Now, this one looks a lot leaner, sportier, and it's even shed a lot of weight over the older bike too. There are two variants of the P150 to choose from, the single disc variant and the dual disc variant. The first pretty obvious difference between the two has to be the disc brake at the rear, and single channel ABS comes standard on both bike models. Other differences lie in the handlebar, where you have a flat conventional handlebar on the single disc variant, whereas with the dual disc bike you have a sportier split handlebar. Then you have the differences in the 17-inch section tires, where you get a skinnier set on the single disc, the seat, where the dual disc gets a split seat while the other has a single bench, and finally you have differences in the form of the grab rail design and rear brake lever. On the design front, the P150 looks very much the part of a modern-day Bajaj motorcycle. Its design appears to have been inspired by the older N250 and N160 models, so now it has a very sleek, sporty edge to it. Both variants of the P150 get projector headlamps and LED DRLs up front, with the halogen bulb turn indicators. The taillight unit is a single split LED unit and keeps in line with the Pulsar lineage. Now, you also get a tiny fly screen ahead of the part analog, part digital display, which is standard across both variants, and a real highlight of this display has to be the amount of information it reads out. While the tachometer is analog, the digital side gives you a distance to empty readout and average fuel economy reading per trip, in addition to displaying the time, gear position, and fuel indication level. Both P150 variants also get a very conveniently located USB socket as well. Now, the tank on this P150 is a 14-litre unit, and it will hold a litre less of fuel in comparison to the older bike. Now, this in turn adds to the entire slimmed down appearance of this motorcycle, and the design of those tank extensions, well, they are an unmistakable Pulsar trait as well. The P150 sports all new alloy wheel designs, and the wheels themselves, which come dressed in MRF Zapper treads, well, they're a lot lighter in comparison to the older Pulsar. Now, this P150 also sports a monoshock suspension unit at the rear, which is the first for the standard 150cc Pulsar model, because if you remember right, well, all the older bikes, they all came with dual spring shocks. The new P150 also gets an underbelly exhaust, unlike the side-slung exhaust cans on the older models.
So this new engine from the P150, a derivative of the older N160, but the same bore and stroke as the previous generation 150cc Pulsar that came out 2 years ago. Now, it is up on power compared to the older model, and its state of tune, well, this promises to be the most economical Pulsar of them all.
Now, the parts that really stand out on this P150 for me have to be 1, the new 150cc engine, and 2, the cradle frame that uses the motor as a stressed member. The engine is an all-new 2-valve air-cooled 150cc single-cylinder unit that's derived from the motor of the older N160. Unlike the older Pulsar model from before, this new bike features a single spark plug and not the DTSI tech as the older models. The 150cc motor has the same displacement as before, which is the same bore and stroke, but is fractionally up on power and torque, now making 14.5 PS of max power and 13.5 Nm of max torque. This new engine is a real gem. It's not as eager to accelerate as the NS and N series models, but it's nowhere close to feeling sluggish either. Another commendable aspect of this motor has to be its level of refinement, and that's a trait you wouldn't naturally associate with the Pulsar brand in the past. The motor has good low-end performance, allowing you to get off the line quickly once the light turns green, and gearing is tall from second all the way up to fifth, which is top gear, and shifts are slick with a light clutch. Bajaj might be calling the P150 the most commuter-friendly and economical Pulsar to date, and it really feels so when you're riding at a leisurely pace. But once you go hard on the gas, rev long and hard, well, this bike feels nice and quick as well. The speedo indicates 100 kmph coming up at around 7,500 rpm, and this bike will touch a top speed of about 115 to 120 kmph depending on the weight you're hauling about. Redlining this bike feels really fun, and this bike feels totally up for it. And you get this positive feeling about it all, not just because of the way the engine manages to pull it off or the thrummy exhaust notes to go along with it, but also because this bike shows off some really impressive road manners.
I have to say that this has to be the most comfortable Pulsar that I have ever ridden to date. The way the suspension is set up and the way you're seated on this bike, and including the seat as well. It all comes together really nicely with this motorcycle.
Now, like the engine of the P150, the chassis out here too has been derived from the older Pulsar N160, and it's constructed from light composite materials. Now this, along with the new lightweight alloy wheels, makes the dual disc P150 weigh in at 141 kg's curb, while the single disc variant weighs a kg lighter. Now this is a massive 10 kgs of the older model and a good 13 kgs lighter than the Pulsar N160. And this chassis lends this bike a certain amount of agility, just makes it so easy to manage. The riding triangle on the dual disc P150 feels a tad sportier in comparison to the single disc variant on account of the split handlebars. But still, this bike is able to change direction so easily at all speeds, and it doesn't feel flustered in the bends too. It's so easy to drop a shoulder and tuck into a corner on this bike, and you'll really have a new definition of commuter motorcycle implanted in your brain after you ride this one. You'll be able to avoid most bumps and undulations on the road with this bike's maneuverability and efficient brakes. And even if you come across a couple of unavoidable undulations, well, the P150 suspension and seating will come to the rescue. The only thing you'll have to be wary of is the bike bottoming out over speed breakers once you have a pillion aboard. So as far as ride and handling goes, the P150 definitely has a lot going for it. And as far as fuel efficiency goes, well, Bajaj are claiming that the single disc variant will return 49 kmpl out in the real world, with the dual disc model offering a couple of kilometers less. But that's something we'll have to test out when we spend some more quality time with this bike. So to sum things up, the Pulsar P150 might be positioned as the most commuter-friendly 150cc Pulsar there is out there currently, but in truth, it offers a lot more than just that. It still has that element of sportiness that I'm sure Pulsar fanboys will really appreciate. Now, the older model will still be on sale for some time and gradually be phased out with the P150 a replacement, and man, what a worthy replacement it is.